This may well be the beginning of something big. The prophetic words of puppeteer Joy Laurie to her assistant Christine Glanville in 1957, weeks before AP Films embarked on their first production, The Adventures of Twizzle. And, well, she wasn't wrong. From humble beginnings grew a television empire. Hundreds of episodes for fans to enjoy. And that's more than enough, isn't it? Of course not. We want more. More scenes, more pictures, more paperwork, more everything. Unsurprisingly, things do turn up. The production of multiple television series generates a lot of material. But it's not like these days, where everything is recorded in detail from every single angle by every single person. When we made Thunderbirds the anniversary episodes in 2015, not only was the behind-the-scenes element extensively covered, but the entire collection of rushes was archived. But that's not how it was done in the old days. The studios held on to scripts what it didn't need and didn't want, and much of what survives now is down to plain, old-fashioned luck. And recently, we've been having quite a bit of it. In August, we were contacted about 22 films in a garden shed. This yielded 6 cans that had material that had never been released. Alternative, untransmitted versions of the Thunderbirds episodes Pit of Peril.
Well, we'll have a darn good try.
Trapped in the Sky.
The new Fireflash Max 6 atomic airliner is in distress at London Airport.
The Fireflash.
And Desperate Intruder.
This is the only way to find out where the gold is.
Untransmitted and alternative versions of 3 Thunderbirds episodes. Then in November, Ashley Sowerby contacted us to alert us to a potential 15 reels of sound effects recorded for and used by AP Films on the Super Mario Nation shows. These recordings were particularly interesting because, as we've outlined in previous videos, playback on a stereo quarter-inch machine yielded a weird cacophony of 70s music and 60s sound effects. After much help and advice, we were able to determine that the original full-track sound effects recordings had been recorded over on a quarter-track machine, but only on one side. This meant the previously full, that's to say single, track tape had now been divided into 4 tracks. Tracks 1 and 3 were home to shows such as Pick of the Pops.
6 weeks in the charts for the Osmond.
But 2 and 4 retained the original AP film sound effects.
Jets being fired underwater, I think.
Once we'd ascertained this, we were able to send the tapes to Mark Ayres, known for, amongst many things, his incredible work restoring audio for archive television, and he was able to successfully transfer the relevant tracks, meaning the sound effects were now free of extraneous noise. We'll be taking a look at these sounds and their creation in another video soon. So all in all, an extraordinary run of luck. Scenes from Thunderbirds no one had ever seen, and 15 tapes of classic sound effects that had miraculously survived first being chucked out, then being recorded over. A good end to 2024. Well, until a week before Christmas, that is, when we got in touch with the family of editor Gordon Davey. Davey had been with the company from its early days as an assistant editor, before becoming the principal editor on Supercar in 1960. He remained with the studio until 1963 and left during early production on Stingray. We were invited to come and look at their eclectic collection of films and audio tapes and see what was on them. The first item we ran was a single reel of an unidentified episode of Supercar.
But why aren't they doing anything, Professor? There hasn't been a peep out of the radio.
You have to realize, Jimmy, it's not yet dawn over there.
This turned out to be Jungle Hazard, and when watching it, we realised that there were subtle alterations to the soundtrack. Here's the bridge scene.
You must be insane. Help!
Oh, good heavens!
Help! It's a swamp! I shall never get out!
Oh, good heavens!
But other than alterations to the soundtrack and one substitute shot, the episode was as normal. Until we got to the end. Here's the episode as first shown in 1961. Here's the version we found.
Well, I guess I'm surprised Miss Farnsworth wouldn't leave Tiny poor. Aren't you, Mitch? Still, there's no accounting for tastes.
My cousin Felicity is a single-minded, woman.
A whole extra closing scene, yet more unseen supermarionation in just 4 months. And then we came to the quarter-inch audio tapes. The most obvious potential find, though one can never tell from the labelling, were 3 boxes of Space 1999 audio rushes. These covered the Tabor and the Rules of Luton. And on a separate unmarked tape, which, as with the sound effects tapes, had also been partially recorded over, audio rushes for Brian the Brain.
Please stop talking.
And so our computer is fully engaged, and some of our non-scientific personnel are having a bit of rest.
Once again, please,
And so our computer is fully engaged, and some of our non-scientific personnel are having a bit of a rest.
Much good that does.
Thank you very
Two, take one.
This find is in itself curious, as Gordon Davey didn't work on Space 1999. But perhaps they offer a clue about the operating manner of studios in general at this time. We had an assortment of 60 tapes to look through. On the surface, some looked interesting, but many seemed to be things such as voiceovers for adverts.
These containers, thundering over the hills of Scandinavia and the rest of Europe, are bringing to ELS what we've all been waiting for. Now it can be revealed. Leather luxury, sweets from Finland. Leather luxury with the Scandinavian touch.
And again, recordings of popular hits, some unidentified tracks,
You know that there's a girl I know. There's a girl I know.
and 60s BBC radio programmes.
Now, here's a word from Alan Melville.
Here is the news. Further decisive steps are believed to have been taken this week regarding Britain's entry into the common market. Any day now.
Excuse me, pardonnez-moi, but êtes-vous le High Wycombe Common Marché?
And a lot of these tapes had been reused. So this tape here for Four Feather Falls appears to be the episode Election Day, probably the dialogue track. However, when we ran it, we found no Four Feather Falls, although curiously, we did find Michael Holliday presenting his show Holiday with Strings.
Well, that's it, folks. Holiday, that's me with strings. That's Johnny Pearce and his orchestra. Join us again next week, won't you, for another Holiday with Strings, which is produced by John Brow. Bye-bye.
So Election Day had been erased by Tex Tucker himself, and that seemed to be the fate of all the tapes, until we found one glimmer of light. On a tape marked Exodus, the soundtrack for the 1960 film, we could see that it had originally been used for the Four Feather Falls episode Trouble at Yellow Gulch. And amazingly, on the right-hand channel, 1 minute of the original recording had survived.
Private property. This here belongs to Pedro and Fernando.
All the money we got and you buy this place. You must be nuts, amigo.
Fernando, you're a nice guy. A buen hombre. But you're a dope.
And then another recording for Exodus kicks in on the right-hand channel.
We got a customer. You'll see how
And Pedro and Fernando's plan is wiped out completely. Such a shame to be so near, but extraordinary that another section of voice recording had surfaced, when only a month before, nothing was known to survive. That is until we found this Supercar dialogue recording on one of the sound effects tapes.
Oh, gee, thanks. Hey, I almost forgot. Where's Mitch?
Just try the gee, thanks. Without there.
Gee, thanks.
This collection made it increasingly clear to us that studios were prepared to use tapes, once or twice, before offering them to others for reuse on either less important parts of production or for domestic use. This tape, which had originally been used for Four Feather Falls, had later been used to record the Moviola output for the films Big Country and The Young Ones.
Now listen, if you've all finished, I think we ought to talk about this do we're supposed to...
So near, yet so far. Then we cast our minds back to the sound effects tapes in December. The Supercar recording with Sylvia Anderson as Jimmy had also partly been erased, albeit this time by AP Films themselves. The ghost of the original recording could still be heard. Now that wasn't the case here, but was it possible that if we examined on a multi-track player, we might find on a thin strip of tape some of the remnants of the town Four-Feather Falls. Multitrack recorders leave small bands of tape in between each track in order to stop bleed-through. On a blank tape, this would remain blank, but on a pre-used tape, this would be left untouched by the recording head and the playback head, meaning it wouldn't be recorded over, but also wouldn't be played back by the same machine, thus effectively becoming invisible. So we ran Yellow Gulch again, waiting for the recording to cut out at the same point.
We got a customer. You just see how quick he plays.
Yeah, ma'am. Just the other side of Yellow Gulch and we're home.
Hey, in your twin.
We had found the original on-set dialogue tape for Yellow Gulch, including a scene of Grandpa Twink closing the episode, which was deleted from the transmitted episode.
Por favor. Not honest business. Oh. Pedro kinda did us a good turn in spite of himself. Well, so long, friends. See you again soon.
Philip Rester.
The recording quality is compromised, but at least it survives. And then we decided to re-examine the other BASF tapes, the brand favoured by AP Films. And one by one, a further series of 3 episodes materialised. Horse Thieves, Dusty Becomes Deputy, and The Toughest Guy in the West.
The toughest guy in the West? Take 1.
And so we went back to the tape for Election Day. But underneath Michael Holliday, there was still no sign of Tex Tucker. And then we spotted on the physical tape EMI markings. This was the right spool, but the wrong reel of tape. But if that had happened here, maybe we should re-examine not the boxes and spools, but the physical tapes themselves. And sure enough, we found another BASF tape on an unbranded, very damaged spool. Now, this didn't contain Election Day. We haven't been able to locate that at all. But there was a recording, and not just any recording, but part of what seems to be the earliest Super Mario Nation voiceover session, the end of how it began with deleted dialogue and an unedited recording of Kidnapped, complete with actors' chat.
11.
Is it? Make 11.
Yeah,
Okay, very fast. Here we go.
It's quite obvious to me the Doctor has been tricked by Pedro and some of his friends.
Even more odd is that this version differs wildly from the transmitted version.
Vamos, no?
Vamos. When there's a bank to be robbed down in Four-Feather Falls?
It's not good, I tell you.
Say, maybe we'll have to.
Work? When there's a bank to be robbed down in Four-Feather Falls?
It's not good, I tell you.
But that's another story. In the meantime, the search continues for missing material, and these long-hidden scenes, which have passed unobserved from studio to studio and production to production, will be preserved for the future. And if you have anything or spot anything that might have potential, we'd love to hear from you. Over the last 6 months, we've learnt a lot about AP Films' working methods, and that offers clues as to where other material may be lurking.